them quietly. The spot they arrive at is completely deserted, which immediately annoys Elena. She starts complaining about how pointless this all is. As she vents, Ghislaine's suspicions only grow. First glance, it's just an empty street. But the way debris and objects block every exit, that clearly shows this was prepared ahead of time. Just then, he's pulled out of his thoughts when Elena suddenly grabs his arm and starts dragging him along. Surprised by her strength, Ghislaine jokingly asks if she's been hitting the gym, because for a young lady, she's seriously strong. But before she can reply, Jamal steps in to stop her, and the expression on his face says it all. His intentions are far from good. Elena starts trembling, panic creeping in as she wonders why everyone is acting so strangely. Jamal quickly apologizes for scaring her, but then his expression twists into something even more disturbing. He calmly says he just wants her to wait a little longer, claiming it's a small favor. Elena, now terrified and feeling utterly helpless, is interrupted by the arrival of someone new. A man wearing glasses steps into the scene, trailed by two of his goons. His name is Frank, and he looks quite satisfied with how well Jamal has handled things so far. Frank then turns to Jamal, confused about why Ghislaine is even here. He doesn't recall ever asking for this extra baggage. Jamal tries to reassure him, saying he'll handle the kid himself, and Frank won't even have to pay. Ghislaine, it turns out, had blindly followed his sister, completely unaware that he was walking right into a death trap. Finally, Ghislaine speaks. The first thing he demands is how this traitorous bastard plans to get away with betraying the Peridium family. But the man just laughs, barely fazed. He arrogantly claims all he has to do is run far away. He's done with this broken, poverty-ridden land that's already been ravaged by barbarians. And he's not alone. Plenty of others want to leave Peridium, too. But before he can finish that sentence, the main character strikes. No words, just blood spilling from his mouth as he drops, sliced clean in two. Everyone stunned. Jamal hits the ground lifeless, and Ghislaine glares at the corpse, furious. He reminds the traitor that even if people chose to leave this land, they never sold out their own. His anger blazes as he locks eyes with the second traitor, who panics and yanks Elena closer, hoping she'll shield him from the same fate. He's dead wrong. A sword drives straight through his skull. He quivers, gasping for air, as death takes him too. Now Frank's goons start having second thoughts, wondering if they even want to get involved. What throws them off even more is that this guy, supposedly the eldest son of Peridium, isn't supposed to have any real combat experience. No training, no skills. At least that's what they believed. But Frank confirms it. This is the eldest son. Still, he can't comprehend how this guy just wiped out two men like it was nothing. And even more shocking, his attacks were laced with mana. Meanwhile, the girl clung to her brother, shaking with fear. But without hesitation, he knocked her out with a quick strike to the neck, telling her to get some rest. Frank, that smug bastard, our guy for taking care of the two knights, pretending they had planned to handle them themselves. He even praised Ghislaine's godlike skills and couldn't help but ask where he learned them. But Ghislaine wasn't having any of it. He shut them down cold, making it clear it was none of their business. He quickly sized them up, 3 of them altogether, but only the one in the middle seemed to be giving off any real mana. Still, no matter who they were, Ghislaine was ready to end this fast. Before making his move, he demanded to know who hired them to stage the ambush. Frank, with that annoying smirk, brushed it off, acting like someone about to die didn't deserve to ask questions. Of course, Ghislaine knew they wouldn't give up the information so easily, but he had his own methods of making people talk. One of the goons suggested just cutting his head off, but their boss shut him down, saying he wanted him alive. He planned to break every bone in Ghislaine's body until he was nothing more than a writhing in pain, making sure his suffering was long and agonizing. With that, 2 of the lackeys charged. But Ghislain was prepared. He suddenly pulled out a firecracker and tossed it at them. That completely threw one of the thugs off. He froze for just a second, confused as to why anyone would use something like a firecracker. But that tiny moment of hesitation was all Ghislain needed. In a blink, he closed the gap and killed one of them on the spot. The second one lunged at him next, but Ghislain didn't flinch. He effortlessly blocked the attack, disarmed him, and yanked the sword from his grip. Without wasting a second, he followed through and cut the guy down like it was nothing. As the second lackey hit the ground, their leader tried to pull a cheap move, sneaking up behind Ghislain to land a surprise blow, but our guy's reflexes were razor-sharp. He blocked the ambush like it was nothing. Frank was stunned, realizing his sneak attack had completely failed, and Ghislain wasn't about to let that slide. He retaliated in an instant, his sword moving so fast that Frank could barely react. The blade slashed deep across his throat, and the pipe he'd been smoking dropped to the ground. Frank, now desperate, launched another attack, but Ghislain easily blocked it again. Even Frank had to admit without using mana to shield his neck, he would have been done for. And even Ghislain had to give him some credit. He'd focused all his mana around his neck to reduce the damage. Pretty impressive, honestly. That's when Frank finally decided to get serious. Clutching his sword tightly, he hurled himself at Ghislain. But just as he did, he caught a glimpse of Ghislain's grin. Like he'd been waiting for this moment. That split second of confusion was all it took. Ghislain completely overpowered him and slammed a brutal kick straight to his face. Frank manages to land on his feet instead of crashing down and smirks, confidently claiming that with his mana levels, a move like that won't affect him. But his confidence crumbles instantly when he starts violently coughing up blood. His expression twists in complete confusion. He has no clue what just hit him. Even though his body was reinforced with dense mana, he can't believe Ghislain still managed to break through it with nothing but raw skill. Meanwhile, Ghislain's thoughts drift to the mystery surrounding his sister's death. He never knew who was responsible until now. And now that he does, he's ready to make this bastard pay. He warns Frank to brace himself because things are about to get real. Then Ghislain activates his third core. Frank stands there stunned, but he doesn't get the luxury of time to react. Ghislain's already charging him. They clash at such insane speed that only the glowing trails of their blades are visible. Frank fights back with everything he's got, but it's clear he's falling behind. His hands are going numb, and no matter how much mana he channels, it's not enough. His sword starts to crack from the sheer pressure. He's never even heard of a technique that boosts mana to this insane level, especially with such control. It's like Ghislain has transformed into an entirely new person. And that new person lands a brutal strike, slashing Frank hard across the body. But Ghislain isn't finished. He drives his sword deep into the man who killed his sister. Still, he doesn't let him die just yet. There are answers he wants, burning questions he needs resolved. Gritting his teeth, Ghislain demands to know who ordered the hit on Elena. But Frank isn't about to give up information so easily. He quickly whips out hidden ninja daggers, trying to go after Elena again. Before he can even move, threads block his arm in motion. Ghislain is the one controlling them. He decides to give Frank one more chance. Answer everything truthfully, and he'll sheath his sword. Frank, now absolutely stunned, realizes the threads are made of mana, crafted and controlled by Ghislain himself. Ghislain knows someone at Frank's level should be able to patch himself up. Not that it'll matter if he destroys his mana core. Without hesitation, he starts channeling magic into the sword already lodged in Frank's gut. The bastard screams as his mana core begins to break apart. It's a dangerous move. One mistake and the mana backlash could explode the entire area. It genuinely looks like Ghislain is risking a full self-destruct, but he's no rookie. He can handle it. Even Frank can tell Ghislain isn't bluffing. When he looks into Ghislain's eyes, all he sees is a blood-soaked Reaper. Realizing he has no way out, Frank finally gives up the name Count Desmond, the real mastermind behind Elena's assassination. He further admits this entire incident was part of a bigger scheme, a setup meant to ignite a war between the Peridium and Dard families. Ghislaine doesn't think highly of the name Desmond. In his past life, dirty work like this was handled by families loyal to the dukes. If his instincts are right, Duke Deline is likely the one pulling the strings. Still, the facts remain. Frank came here to kill his sister. So, Ghislaine makes sure to finish him off and take revenge for the past. Frank, in his final moments, thinks Ghislaine is going back on his word. But Ghislaine coldly reminds him of all the sins he's committed. He has no right to be afraid now that karma is finally caught up. But then, something unexpected. Frank starts laughing even as he bleeds out. He claims nothing will change. Even if Ghislaine kills him, the damage is done. He's already completed his mission with the Daggard family. No matter what Ghislaine does now, Peridium is doomed. War is inevitable. Ghislaine swiftly covers the bastard's filthy mouth to shut him up and quietly tells him the truth. He's already died once and come back, so there's no way he's letting history repeat itself. Those were the last words Frank heard before Ghislaine activated the mana core shattering process. The mana inside surged backward, and Ghislaine redirected it into the sky, triggering a massive explosion. Like some warped firework. Exhausted, Ghislaine could barely breathe, but at least everyone who needed to be dealt with had been taken care of. Then he noticed his unconscious sister lying there, seemingly safe and peacefully asleep. Just as he let his muscles relax and close his eyes for a moment, blood suddenly spilled from his mouth, and he doubled over in pain. He thought to himself, back when he was the mercenary king, destroying 3 cores would have been easy. But now, with his fragile body, it's clearly limiting him. Even so, he wasn't ready to give up. He quickly made his way to a nearby house and discovered a corpse. In his previous life, authorities had found a second body at this same location along with Elena's. And from what Frank had mentioned earlier, that body was supposedly the guard's son. There was also the escort knight who died during the event. These bodies were the reason why the Peridium family in his past life had assumed the Dard family was behind Elena's assassination. The moment those corpses were discovered, war had broken out. This time, Ghislaine made sure there would be no such evidence. He set the entire house ablaze. After that, he picked up his sister and began walking away. That's when we see some creep in a cap lurking in the shadows, secretly watching him. Later, that same guy shows up at a shady council. Basically, all the people running the show behind the scenes, and reports that the mission failed. Naturally, the big wigs weren't happy to hear it. One of them, cloaked in a hood, blames everything on Ghislaine. Peridium. The moment that name comes up, the room tenses. How could some nobody from the north pull off something this huge? Another council member scoffs, saying Ghislaine's always been a worthless piece of trash, so blaming the failure on him sounds ridiculous. But the hooded guy insists Ghislaine was nothing like the man they had intel on. The way he executed everything was far too skilled, almost like he'd become an entirely new person. He tries to calm him down by saying he's already handled things with the Dar family, so sparking a territorial war won't be a problem. He pleads for one more shot to prove himself, but one of the higher-ups explodes in anger. The chaos from his failure has already caused serious problems, and now the entire council is in disarray. They all agree that the only solution is to kill Ghislaine. Then the top dog among them finally speaks, cutting through the noise. He asks the hooded man how he plans to handle Ghislaine. The reply, he's going to set up a duel, make it look natural, and the opponent, someone powerful. When asked who this person is, the hooded guy says, it's Kane Lowe's, a powerhouse swordsman known for his brute strength. Despite being young, Kane is unmatched in physical combat. And here's the kicker, he's Ghislaine's cousin. That connection would make their encounter feel perfectly natural, not staged. The room falls silent as they mull over the idea. But the top guy doesn't let him off the hook so easily. He warns that if this mission fails, too, there won't be another chance. Shaken, the hooded man quickly swears he'll deliver results this time. The scene shifts to the Peridium Castle's training hall, where Fergus arrives to inform our boy that it's time for a meal. But just then he spots a rope-like thread of mana flying toward him. It grabs the sword hanging beside him and quickly retracts, pulling the sword along. Ghislain, having practiced for a while now, is pleased to see he's making progress. That's when he notices Fergus, who immediately bows his head in apology for interrupting the session. But Fergus can't help his curiosity and asks how Ghislain managed that move. Ghislain casually explains that it's something called mana threads, using mana like string. In his previous life, it was second nature to him. But now his current skill level is too low and he lacks the mana needed to use it like before. To do so fully, he'd have to implode his core. However, by creating just one thread, he can minimize the mana cost and still use it effectively despite his limited resources. Fergus admits that despite training his mana for a long time, he's never seen anything like this. Now that he thinks about it, not long ago, Ghislain wasn't even using mana at all, let alone training with it. He's baffled by how Ghislain came up with the idea, shaking himself out of it. Fergus returns to the reason he came. He respectfully nods and thanks Ghislain for protecting the young lady. But Ghislain brushes it off. There's no need for thanks. She's his sister and he would have done it no matter what. A few days pass and the festival is put on hold. Understandable given that a guardian knight just tried to traffic a noble lady. Meanwhile, Elena is fuming. No one believes her when she says Ghislain was the one who saved her. She asks her brother why he won't step in and convince them. But Ghislain just shrugs. He doesn't care. And even if he tried, no one would believe him anyway. Belinda, on the other hand, is furious. Just thinking about how the real culprits were Jamal and Philp, the ones who attempted to abduct Elena. Regardless, Ghislain is just relieved that his sister is safe and that he managed to prevent a war. But deep down he knows those bastards won't stop so easily, and he can't hold them off forever on his own. He needs to start building his own military force. Just then, a maid enters with food. But instead of something nice, Ghislain gets a dry piece of bread. Surprised, he asked Belinda about it. She explains that it's part of the fallout from the recent chaos. Right then, a loud voice echoes through the halls. Some fat merchant yelling for compensation because of the cancelled festival. And it's not just him. There's a whole mob of merchants gathered outside, demanding they be reimbursed for their losses. Looking out the window, Ghislain asks who they are, and Belinda reminds him. This country's economy relies heavily on merchants and the profits from the festival. Last year was a huge success, but this year it got cancelled after just one day. No wonder they're pissed. Only now does Ghislain realize just how bad the financial situation is. If he doesn't do something soon, things could spiral out of control. He tells Fergus to send out soldiers to calm the crowd. But Fergus calmly informs him that there are no soldiers available. Most of them have been dispatched to the Forest of Monsters to help with reconstruction after the orc raid. That makes things even worse. Peridium is in a constant state of war. Barbarians to the north, and monsters to the south. No money means no soldiers, which just piles onto his growing list of problems. Taking Belinda aside, he whispers that since she's in charge of his finances, they need to find a way to settle the merchants down. But Belinda tells him straight. There's no money left. When he asks why, she reminds him that the Lord cut off his funds because he kept spending recklessly. The idea of being broke makes Ghislain sick. He demands she lend him some cash, but she doesn't have any either. Everything seems stacked against him. No money, no soldiers, and no way out. Even with all his future knowledge, he's helpless without money. to back it up. Just as he's lost in thought, Ricardo bursts into the room at full speed, panting hard. Alarmed, Ghislain immediately asks what's going on. Ricardo, practically shouting, says there's a problem. Young Master Kane is demanding to see him. The mere mention of Kane catches Ghislain completely off guard. That's when we witness one of our guys, Knights Commander Scone, getting absolutely wrecked by Kane. Kane's insanely built body and brute strength are pounding the poor knight's face like it's a ripe tomato. Every punch feels like a sledgehammer, and clearly Kane isn't holding back at all. The final blow knocks Scone out cold. Ghislain arrives just in time to find his knight lying beaten and bloodied on the ground. The look on Ghislain Land's face says it all. He's furious. He turns to face his cousin, eyes blazing with rage. The bastard standing in front of him is massive, so big that Ghislain looks like a scrawny kid in comparison. And that wicked grin on Kane's face only makes things more intimidating. Beside Kane stands his escort knight. You see, Kane Lowes, heir to the Lowes County, is the very one with whom House Peridium once had an alliance. He used to be Ghislain's only friend and his biggest rival. After knocking out the commander, Kane casually approaches Ghislain, but Ghislain doesn't flinch. Calm and composed, he asked Ricardo to explain what exactly happened. Ricardo recounts that they were responding to a report of trouble at a tavern. That's where they encountered Kane and his escort knight. During the confrontation, Kane asked Commander Scone if the rumors about Ghislain were true. When Scone explained the details, Kane suddenly grabbed him by the mouth, accusing him of muttering lies under his breath and refusing to tolerate anyone lying to the heir of Lois. At that point, Ricardo finishes his version of events. But then Kane's escort knight steps in, saying, Ricardo left out a key part. He adds that Scone had claimed Ghislain, someone who never even trained properly, had taken down an orc bare-handed and defeated the traitorous escort knights all by himself. That's what pissed Kane off. He thought Scone was spreading nonsense and gave him a beating as a reality check. Kane then smugly says none of this would have happened if Scone hadn't lied. Ghislain doesn't respond out loud, but inside we hear his thoughts and they're full of bitterness toward Kane. Once his subordinate, Kane always stirred up chaos whenever he visited Peridium. And no matter the mess he made, no one dared call him out because he was allied with House Peridium. People always respected Kane. But Ghislain, he was constantly judged and looked down upon, while Kane was praised. For his bold, confident nature, traits expected from a rightful heir, Ghislain was criticized for not measuring up. Now, from Kane's perspective, even he's surprised at how calm Ghislain is being. Normally, Ghislain would have snapped and come out by now. We then get a flashback to a recent moment in Lois County. Kane had received an order to kill Ghislain. The one giving the order was a hooded man, someone who'd previously failed a mission and taken heat for it from his superiors. This same hooded figure told Kane that if he succeeded, the esteemed one would back the Loia's family. Kane confidently assured him that defeating Ghislain would be easy. After all, Ghislain was nothing but a weak brat. But there was one thing that gave him pause. Ghislain was still an heir, so killing him could lead to political complications. The hooded man suggested a solution. Provoke Ghislain into a duel. Make it look like a simple squabble between noble heirs. Then stage the whole thing as an unfortunate accident. To make sure things went smoothly, the hooded man offered to disguise himself as one of the escort knights to help orchestrate everything. That way, nothing could go wrong. The idea of getting to murder his own cousin thrilled Kane, and the bastard didn't hesitate to agree. In the present, Kane is trying to figure out why there's an order to eliminate Ghislain. He wonders if maybe Ghislain has changed recently, which could be the reason. Still, Kane sticks to the plan. To provoke Ghislain, he calls out and asks why he's just standing there. They're facing off, so he better get things ready. Ghislain, confused, doesn't know what arrangements Kane is referring to. Kane brings up how the festival's been disrupted, and suggests they should spice things up and have some fun. He also reminds Ghislaine how they've always been on the same page for these kinds of things. But Ghislaine barely reacts and vaguely asks if Kane is talking about alcohol. See, this bastard used to make Ghislaine prepare booze and women every time he showed up. Back then, Ghislaine went along with it just to avoid a beating. But not anymore. Because of Kane, he burned through a ton of money, which is also why his father ended up cutting his allowance. Now, Ghislaine has clearly figured out the root of his financial troubles, and he's certain Kane is the problem and possibly the solution, too. Meanwhile, Kane keeps pressing, demanding that Ghislaine bring him the goods immediately. Ghislaine, playing along, agrees, but says that first Kane needs to repay the money he owes. The hooded bastard can sense something has changed. Ghislaine is giving off a completely different vibe now. Even Kane pauses and seriously asks what debts he's talking about. With a calm smile, Ghislaine explains that he's been the one managing all of Kane's requests with his own money, and now he wants at least 1,000 gold back. Kane is stunned. To him, that's a ridiculous number. He thought it should have cost no more than 100 gold. Besides, he believed Ghislaine was doing all that because they were friends, like a friends with benefit situation. But Ghislaine never saw them as friends. He's been this guy's doormat for too long. And now if Kane values his life, he better pay up. He needs the money desperately and isn't letting Kane walk away without paying his dues. The whole room falls silent, and even Ghislaine's own knight, Ricardo, is sweating bullets after hearing such a bold demand. Kane shoots up from his seat, furious. He thinks Ghislaine is getting too cocky, probably because of the rumors going around about him. To Kane, Ghislaine is still just a leech, feeding off this land. Boiling with rage, he clenches his fist, ready to crush him right there. But even as the punch flies straight at him, Ghislaine doesn't even blink. At the last second, he shifts slightly, letting the punch miss completely. Shock fills the room. Kane swings again with full force, but Ghislaine ducks and drives an open palm strike right into Kane's gut. The blow is so strong it nearly makes the brute cough up blood. Kane tries to swing again, but this time Ghislaine freezes his movement. Even though Kane doesn't actually take damage, he acts like he's in pain. The hooded figure rushes over, concerned, but it's obvious Kane's pride is the only thing hurt. Ghislaine casually tells him to stop faking. It wasn't even a real hit, but Kane keeps playing the victim. Everyone watching in the pub is left stunned. Ghislaine, the supposed weakling, just took Kane down without even trying. People are unsure how to react. Ghislaine, of course, knows this bastard is faking it, and he knows exactly what Kane's trying to pull. Kane then turns to his hooded knight and smugly asks if he liked the performance. The knight gives him credit. It was a great act. Kane set things up perfectly to make it seem like Ghislaine is the one at fault just enough to justify a duel. Kane is eager to use this opportunity. If he helps the higher-ups take down Ghislaine, he'll earn their support. Plus, it give him a chance to sever ties with the Peridium household. So, he plays along, pulls out a glove, and with some theatrical lines gets ready to declare a duel. But before he can toss the glove, Ghislaine beats him to it and throws the glove straight at Kane's face, challenging him first. After all, Kane insulted the heir of Peridium and assaulted his knight in front of everyone. So now Ghislaine demands a duel. Kane's face goes still, but only for a moment. Then he smirks, thinking Ghislaine to sign his own death sentence by asking for the duel. But Ghislaine keeps that confident, sassy smile on his face. He then turns to Ricardo and tells him to gather all the merchants protesting outside the castle. He wants them to witness something big because Ghislaine, the young master of the Peridium house, is about to make them some serious money. So, the festival got cancelled out of nowhere and the electric atmosphere that had reached its peak suddenly fizzled out. This left a bunch of disappointed tourists stuck there, unable to leave or enjoy themselves. Basically, like a fire that never got a burn properly. In such a situation, if something exciting were to happen, it would be like a blessing for them. That's why when Ghislaine steps into the ring to face that bastard, the crowd absolutely erupts in excitement. People are pouring in from distant places, and the market vendors who had been struggling finally start making some money from these stranded tourists. The chubby merchant, the one who led the protests earlier, now has a full setup with a betting table, letting people place their bets on the fighters. Most of them are betting on Kane Lowe's, which makes sense. It seems like the safe option. Kane, the hulking brute, stands ready with his massive sword, prepared to begin. But he's clearly irritated that what was supposed to be a serious duel is now turning into some carnival spectacle. He makes it clear up front. He's not going to stop, even if Ghislaine surrenders. But Ghislaine isn't shaken. He can tell the bastard's real goal is to kill, surrender or not. And since the crowd's big enough now, Ghislaine officially kicks off the duel. Just then, a hooded guy interrupts, claiming that the betting can't proceed like this. Everyone's confused until the fat merchant explains. No one is bet on young Master Ghislaine. The crowd begins whispering. It's clear they've already written him off. They think he doesn't stand a chance. Ken even finds it funny, like even the marketplace wants nothing to do with Ghislaine. Because the bet is so one-sided, they decide to adjust the rules to make it a little fairer. That's when Commander Scoven steps up with a bag full of money and places his bet on Ghislaine. To everyone's surprise, Lady Elena also brings out a bag and bets on her brother. While people expected Scoven to show, Elena's appearance catches even Ghislaine off guard, and the crowd's buzzing. She asks the merchant if that much money is enough, and he respectfully says yes. Now that Ghislaine finally has some support, Kin agrees to start the duel, though he's clearly annoyed by how things are unfolding. The match begins, and Ghislaine offers Kane the first strike, saying that since Kane's younger, Big Brother would love to give him the opening move. That cheap knockoff of the Hulk looks confused by the gesture, but Ghislaine confidently draws his sword and calls him out. Kane goes silent for a second, then takes the bait. He gets into position, charges forward like a raging bull, and slams down with his enormous blade. Their swords clash violently. Kane puts every bit of his strength into the hit, but Ghislaine doesn't even flinch. So Kane swings again, this time without thinking, and Ghislaine dodges it with ease. The brute jumps up for a kick, but again, Ghislaine casually avoids it. After this quick back and forth, both fighters retreat briefly. Kane grins with that same creepy smile, clearly enjoying himself. Ghislaine can see the arrogance radiating off him. Belinda is sweating, watching her young master go toe-to-toe with this beast. She even urges Lady Elena to stop her brother. Meanwhile, the hooded guy is feeling smug, totally convinced Ghislaine doomed. He believes Ghislaine has already fallen into the trap. The moment he chose to fight Kane, he was finished. In his mind, Ghislaine will get overwhelmed by Kane's monstrous power, won't find a way to counter, and will burn out all his energy just dodging. Eventually, Ghislaine will slip up and get killed. That's how Kane has crushed so many opponents. Pure brute strength. But this time, Ghislaine is more than a match, dodging every attack with insane agility. Even Kane has to admit that Ghislaine become a lot harder to pin down. His skills have improved. Frustrated, Kane pushes even harder. He grabs his blade by the sharp edge with his bare hands and swings at Ghislaine with full force. Though Ghislaine manages to block the blow using his own sword, the attack traps him within Kane's crushword. Then, using all his strength, Kane hurls Ghislaine high into the sky. Everyone is left stunned, mouths wide open, watching the young master suspended in a dare. The only person who seems thrilled is the hooded guy. He's convinced Ghislaine is done for, but he's about to get a rude awakening. While still airborne, Ghislaine channels mana into his legs and regains balance, landing gracefully on the ground. Initially, Ghislaine have been holding back, but now that this jerk has pushed things too far, he's done playing nice. In a flash, he dashes toward Kane at godlike speed, and zips past him. The hooded guy can't believe his eyes. Ghislain managed to land unharmed using mana in his legs. To Ghislain, this oversized brute is nothing but a clueless swordsman. Probably someone who assumed he was unbeatable just because people got intimidated by a glimpse of his strength. But Ghislain's here to crush that delusion and show him that raw power isn't everything. Cain, feeling mocked, charges again, demanding how Ghislain plans to prove that. Ghislain plants his feet, kicks up the hilt of his sword, leaps into the air, and rains down multiple strikes. Cain fights back with his own blade. But Ghislain quickly sidesteps and even steps on Cain's sword, catching him off guard. With the brute briefly disarmed, Ghislain seizes the opening and slashes him. After the intense exchange, Ghislain comes to a sudden halt while Cain starts bleeding from every spot that got struck. The crowd is speechless. Shock and a ripple through them as they realize just how far Ghislain has come. Whispers turn into panic. Could he actually win this? Elena, proud and confident, tells Belinda that her earlier fear was unnecessary. Commander Scoven watches with pride at the incredible display, but the hooded man is drenched in sweat, noticing that the wounds Ghislain inflicted are shallow. He could have gone deeper, but chose not to. That alone tells him Ghislain is in full control. Cain, on the other hand, feels utterly humiliated witnessing such divine swordsmanship. Ghislain now turns to the defeated Cain and throws away his sword. He doesn't plan to use it anymore. He thinks the gap in their skill is so massive that weapons aren't needed. He's going to finish this with his bare hands. That much disrespect is enough to make Cain's blood boil. Ghislain is ready to teach him a brutal lesson with his fists. Since the big guy's strength lies in hand-to-hand combat, Ghislain decides to hand-decap himself and fight in his opponent's preferred style. And to make things more interesting, he now bets 2,000 gold, double the original amount. The crowd is in disbelief, hearing such a high wager for a bare-handed match, especially when it was supposed to be a sword duel. Meanwhile, the hooded man is practically melting, watching Ghislain fearlessly challenge Cain without a weapon. He never thought he'd see the day. Still, a part of him believes Cain might have a shot. The fat merchant quickly announces that the fight is now officially bare-handed and encourages everyone to place new bets. This time, more people are siding with Ghislain, realizing that strength alone doesn't guarantee victory. Cain, still arrogant, accepts the challenge, but he refuses to drop his sword. He plans to use it against Ghislain anyway. Belinda panics and pleads with Ghislain to pick up his sword again, but the brute already starts swinging. And Ghislain, calm and collected, completely unfazed, ready to knock some sense into this oversized fool. The moment that sword came crashing down, Ghislain swiftly ducked so fast that his after-image seemed to lag behind. He struck hard at the opponent's oversized leg, immediately following it with a brutal uppercut to the chin. Blood gushed from Cain's face. That single blow was enough to rattle his brain and bring one of his knees crashing to the ground. It was unreal. Cain hadn't even seen the hits coming. The audience was just as stunned as everyone else, absolutely loving the unexpected twist in the fight. Meanwhile, Ghislain radiated pure confidence and charm, claiming he hadn't even gotten serious yet and still wanted to have more fun. This bruised the fatty's delicate ego, making him grit his teeth before charging at Ghislain once more. But our boy danced around him, effortlessly, dodging every strike with grace. The fight choreography was next level. Even as the narrator, it was hard to keep up with Ghislain's godlike moves. No matter what Cain tried, every attack was met with a counter and an even stronger hit. Blow after blow rained down on him. As Cain reeled from the pain, he found himself thinking back, remembering how Ghislain once couldn't even meet his eyes, always bowing low whenever Cain showed up. But now that dynamic had completely flipped. Cain kept getting hammered, turned into nothing more than a training dummy. His whole body was a canvas of bruises, his face so beaten up that not even his own mother would recognize him. At one point, Gisling grabbed Kane by the hair. Looking at this stubborn mess of a man, he couldn't help but feel pity. Not for Kane, but for his family. Count Loos had stood by House Peridium with unwavering loyalty, even when it was falling apart simply because he was a close friend of Gisling's father. But Kane was nothing like his old man. The scene briefly shifted to the past. Kane was seen shouting at his father, furious about his endless support for House Peridium. He thought his father was throwing away valuable resources on a dying cause. It hadn't even been a week since Count Lois came back home. Yet he was already preparing to leave again for Peridium. Canid begged him not to go, his frustration boiling over at what he saw as blind loyalty. But the Count responded gently yet firmly. He was doing it because they were friends. That was the only reason. Back in the present, Gisling balled up his fist. Everyone expected another brutal punch. But instead he reached out with a hand of friendship. It shocked everyone. No one had expected this gesture, least of all Kane. But to everyone's surprise, Kane accepted it and admitted defeat. The crowd was floored. King conceding. The match left everyone speechless. The referee wasted no time in declaring Gisling the winner. Members of House Peridium were thrilled watching their young master shine, while Elena was especially joyful to see her brother finally claim victory. But then a hooded man stormed over to the defeated Kane and began scolding him. He couldn't believe Kane gave up so quickly just because things weren't going his way. Kane didn't argue. He simply turned his face away and said he was done with the game. Since Kane failed to take Gisling down, the hooded guy started stressing about how he'd explained this to his seniors. Just then, our boy made another move, this time with a mischievous grin. Gisling shouted loud enough for everyone to hear that the hooded man here had volunteered to cover the cost of all the meat and drink for the entire crowd. The hooded guy flipped out, completely stunned by the sudden announcement. But the crowd, they went wild, thrilled at the idea of free food and booze. The hooded man immediately protested, yelling that he never agreed to any of this and demanding Gisling take it back. But our guy just smiled, placed a firm hand on the guy's shoulder, and told him that this was the price of defeat. And no, this wasn't coming out of the existing bet. He told him to add another 2,000 gold on top of the original 1,000. If he tried to run, there'd be serious consequences. And when Gisling said that, he wasn't joking. The threat in his words burned straight into the man's memory, leaving behind the image of someone not to be messed with. Later the next day, in Gisling's room, we find Gisling staring at a treasure chest full of glittering gold coins. The amount of money he has is actually pretty huge. To give you an idea of how much it is, you could easily hire a small mercenary corps with this amount of money. But it takes a lot of time to grow money, and those bastards who want him killed won't wait for his forces to grow. So he only has a limited amount of time to execute the business plan he has in mind. That's when Belinda and his sister come up to him with satisfied smiles on their faces. The way they're looking at him feels like they have some ulterior motive hidden behind their smiles. He quickly questions why they're here, to which his little sister politely asks where he plans to spend all this money. Of course, Gisling catches on to what she's implying. So, he directly asks her if she wants some, to which the lady responds that she's just asking. Belinda then speaks up, stating that she has a pretty good idea of where he's going to spend it all. She is sure that since Lady Amelia's birthday is coming up soon, Gisling must be planning to put on a grand show to buy his fiancée an expensive present. But we all know that our boy isn't thinking about this at all. However, the mention of a fiancée catches Gisling completely off guard.